What's the one thing that can instantly turn your $3,000 dream trip into a nightmare? Gear failure. Boom. Just like that. But here's the good news. With just a little bit of planning and a few smart items, you can avoid that disaster entirely. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down the ultimate save a dive kit. It's not just about what to pack, it's about how to build it smartly and over time, piece by piece. And you'll probably be surprised by a few of the items that made my list. By the end, you'll be ready to tackle any gear emergency, from broken fin straps to a leaky O-ring on your regulator. Imagine this. You've flown halfway across the globe to some of the best diving spots available. The water's warm, the reef is calling your name, you suit up, and snap! There goes your fin strap, busted right off. The average dive trip costs from $2,000 to $6,000. That's not a small amount. Any downtime could feel disappointing. A true tragedy. Maybe you can rent gear, maybe not. Either way, you're losing time. And I've been there. I once drove 2 hours to a dive site, excited like a kid on Christmas, slipped into my dry suit, and crack, there goes my neck seal. Should have put on some talcum powder. Truly disappointing experience. But that's what inspired me to build my own Save a Dive kit. And now I don't leave home without it. And hopefully after you watch this video, you don't find yourself as disappointed as I was on a dive of your own. You can build your own, or you can follow what I did. You don't need to be a gear junkie for this. You just need the right few pieces, and I'll show you exactly how I built mine. I'll recommend some starter pieces and stuff you might want to consider getting over time, like some nice to haves. This will allow you to build it up slowly over time so it doesn't break the bank or feel like too much stuff you have to carry around with you. In my case, I literally just use this bag as I got part of my dry suit, I believe. It's not a dry bag, and so it doesn't really need to be anything expensive. You just kind of need a bag at the very least. It just needs to be something you can identify and be compact that you can easily bring with you everywhere you're planning on diving. Many will say you should get a dry bag or a dry box, and that might be the case if you're on a boat that is susceptible to sea spray. But otherwise, for my case, it's usually shore diving and this works out perfectly. But also, you can usually just bag stuff inside of Ziploc bags for organization, and that just works out fine. And it also makes them water resistant to some degree. This is a cheap and space effective solution that has worked well for me over the years. But your situation may vary and you might find it reasonable to upgrade to something more robust, like a full plastic watertight container to keep things dry. But here's the golden rule to starting your Save a Dive kit. Whenever you buy some new gear, it comes with spare parts. Save those. Spare bolts, nuts, rings, O-rings, seals, or whatever provided by the manufacturer. They're there for a reason, for that, and you can use them to repair your gear down the road. Stash those in your kit. You'll thank yourself later. The idea is, if you use a piece of gear often enough, it's eventually going to break. That's just how it goes. So the trick is to have backup parts ready for those common failure points. That way, when something breaks, you'll be able to repair it on the spot. When I use something from my kit to fix a piece, I immediately try to replace it after the dive or the trip. Often, I like to keep two of different pieces, such as one as a spare and one as an oh-shoot extra spare. But it's situational. It's a simple habit, but it means my kit is always stocked and ready to save the day. So, what actually goes in your Save a Dive kit? If you're enjoying this video, now's a great time to like and subscribe. I post weekly to help new divers grow their skills, build confidence, and explore the ocean with curiosity and care. And by the way, if you're interested in staying up to date with the scuba industry, go ahead and subscribe to my newsletter in the description below. Let's kick things off with your warm water essentials, aka the foundation of your Save a Dive kit. Think of this as your dive gear's first line of defense. Let's start with one of the most notorious weak points in your kit: mask straps. Silicone ones love to snap at the worst possible times. You're standing on the dive boat, waves gently rocking, excitement in the air, and snap. there goes your strap. It's happened to me before. That's why I always carry one extra or at least a neoprene strap that has some Velcro that can be slotted where the silicone strap would be. And this makes for a fine backup. In addition to that, consider packing a spare mask altogether. Seriously, just toss one in your pocket for a just in case moment you lose it while diving. If your mask floods, cracks, or somehow disappears into the abyss, hey, it happens. Having backup is a dive saver. Literally, you can just pull it out of your pocket, put it on, and continue your dive. But at the very least, if you have a spare on the trip, it's easy to switch to for the remainder of the trip and doesn't take much space, really. It's not even that heavy. Next up, it's a great idea to carry a bunch of extra O-rings in a variety of sizes, but especially for the first and second stages of your regulator. These things are prone to wear and tear, and especially on yoke connections, so carrying extras is not a bad idea. Often dive shops will have extras on hand for yoke tanks, so this is generally more important for your first stage on your DIN regulator or your second stages. And of course, there's some times where the dive shop is not easily nearby, so that's when carrying your own spares will help out. But okay, we're gonna break it down MacGyver style, because just carrying O-rings may not be the total complete solution. You will need some tools too. Working on your regulator is going to need 3 common tools that are an absolute must for your Save a Dive kit. This adjustable wrench for the bolts on your second stage, and these hex wrenches for your first stage. I like myself a multi-tool like this that comes with a whole bunch of extra stuff like a pick and some other tools that come in handy. But it's worth noting that this thing tends to be a little heavier. Then you need some O-ring picks. It's important to note that O-rings are delicate to being stabbed, so brass picks like this one aren't great. So I have a plastic one when I can use it, and I use this whenever I can. But it's big, and so for small O-rings, I really don't have a choice but this brass pick, but I have to be very delicate when using it. I use both, but I always prefer the plastic one in most cases, if the O-ring's not tiny. I also like to include silicone grease that you can use on most of your O-rings. You really don't need much. You're really gonna just put a tiny dab, wiggle it around your fingers, and basically spread it on your fingers, put an O-ring there, and then basically moosh it in there. And so when you are finished, you shouldn't see any visible silicone on there. It should just be kind of glistening in the light, but it should be like no chunks or anything, because you don't want anything to attract dirt on this. And then you'll put it right on where the O-ring should go. One tiny note is if you have a regulator that needs to be oxygen clean, then you can't use normal silicone. You'll have to use oxygen safe lubricant, but otherwise the process is the same. And you'll know if you need an oxygen safe lubricant because of your training and the gear that you have. I just want to make a small note. This stuff is expensive, so you don't just go and buy it. Normally you'll use a cheap silicone in most cases. And to be clear, that's only if you're using a regulator that's going to be exposed to more than 40% oxygen. So it's pretty rare for most recreational diving. Okay, here's our first nice to have. If you use the type of fins where you put a bootie on and strap it onto your foot, which I particularly enjoy myself, those fin straps can be a sneaky failure point. Some are built tougher than others, and sometimes the whole joint breaks that holds the strap. But still, buying some extra universal ones as a spare just in case makes it repairable, as long as those joints don't break. The same for the mask too. If the joints break on fins or the mask, it's done for. But a spare pair of fins is a bit hard to pull off for travel, so it might be better just to see what the boat has to offer if that breaks. Extra fin straps are a nice to have in my book. One time, my mouthpiece just had enough wear and tear that the tray of it busted in half through the mouthpiece. I had to finish the dive chewing on one side like a pirate. It worked, but it's not ideal. For sequential dives, I can't even remember what I did. I think I made use of one I borrowed or something. But now I always carry a spare mouthpiece, and this can save a dive. truly, along with some zip ties that you can attach it to your regulator with. And just in case, like one time my necklace that holds my octo on my neck broke, and so I always carry one of these two. In the worst case, I can always put the octo in the triangle somewhere else with one of these. So that's helped. I mean, it's happened to me. I haven't had to use these since, but you just never know. And these are small enough, like honestly, that I would put in my Save a Dive kit any day. Now, on to wetsuits. They're not invincible. A small tear can ruin your day, so a neoprene repair kit is a nice to have. I don't normally carry one myself, but I have seen people save their dives by fixing theirs. Don't forget bonding adhesive and even a few clothespins, surprisingly handy for temporary fixes. And a nice wetsuit repair kit could be especially handy if your wetsuit already has quite a bit of wear and tear. Now here's where things get a little DIY or do it yourself. These fixes aren't pretty, but they work. For those hacky hacks, to just make it work, throw in water-resistant super glue, zip ties, and duct tape, especially for something like a wetsuit. All these are fairly easy and don't take up too much space or weight, except for maybe duct tape, which is a bit more bulky, so consider that optional, but worth it if you've got the space. Great for field repairs. Most important for those hacky hacks is also decent amount of paracord or bungee. You just find yourself, the more you dive, paracord and bungee are just great to have for all sorts of things. These go great for trying pieces together and loops onto things or just some real professional grade field repairs. But even with the hackiest field repairs, and most importantly, if you can't fix something to the point you and your team feels is suitable or safe, it's best not to dive. It is your life on the line, so use your best judgment. You're trying to save a dive to the best of your ability. An additional tip is to stay sane and use organized bags, like these small zipper bags, and you can label them or not, but it's usually pretty obvious to me, and I try to categorize stuff, so when I'm searching for things, I'm just looking for a specific bag I can pull out and get the thing I need out of it. Keep the fragile things like O-rings and nuts and bolts neatly and safely packed. If you use defog solution, I usually just toss in the Save a Dive kit too, so I don't forget it, because I've forgotten many times. In addition, extra bolt snaps come in real handy in a pinch too. They're cheap, well, semi-cheap, they're lightweight, and they solve a lot of problems. Along the same lines, and when I need it, it's super important, and I'm okay putting this in there just in case I don't forget it, is the dent yoke adapter. This is situational. I don't always take it on all the trips, but if I know I'm gonna need it, I'm definitely gonna put it in there, so I don't forget it. When you need it, although you won't need it if you use a yoke regulator already. But likewise, if you are using a yoke, you can pack some of these nuts for pro valves if the cylinders you're going to be diving with are pro valve compatible, which most modern cylinders are, but these are really nice to pack and easy to put in anyways. I usually just keep mine in my kit just in case. A super nice to have, but I have seen some people include this in their Save a Dive kit, and it's not a terrible idea, but this piece is a bit more spendy and bulky. But you can buy an extra power inflator for your BCD. It is a failure point that these inflators do tend to break, but being able to swap out the whole inflator will keep you diving strong. I don't pack one myself, but I am considering in the future. Lastly, and this is another nice to have, but spare batteries for your torch. You just have to remember to charge them or it won't be super useful to you. It is also situational, because sometimes they're proprietary batteries and you can't get extra batteries, or they're built into your torch. But if you can, you just have to remember to charge them or buy some new alkaline batteries depending on the type of batteries you need, but they're super useful if you need them. Like I said, consider it optional to keep that in your dive kit. It does require some maintenance. Generally, I like to keep my Save a Dive kit fairly low maintenance. Stuff that I can just put in there, kind of forget about it until I need it. And it's worth noting that if you're going to be checking in your Save a Dive kit into a flight, you want to make sure the batteries are safe to put in luggage for a flight on where you're going. A lot of places, lithium batteries checked in luggage is a no-go. Another good item that's often overlooked for your dive kit is a first aid kit. When hiking in the wilderness, almost every backpacker is going to have some level of first aid kit on them, but yet most divers don't follow the same thought process. Mine goes with me everywhere, so it's not always in my Save a Dive kit, but if you can store it there, then great. Less chance you'll leave it behind. I bring my first aid kit on every single trip. I kind of bought a pre-made kit and I've been customizing it over the years. You don't need anything fancy. A few bandages, painkiller, emergency blanket, seasickness meds, a sling, hydrocortisone, and a small pair of scissors at the minimum. It doesn't need to be that big. You can get something more robust, but honestly, I take this thing everywhere, so I want it to be light, but I also want it to be flexible. I built my own over time, but I did spot Dan or Divers Alert Network offers a $20 travel first aid kit for diving that looks like a pretty decent deal and a good start for most divers. I'd say emergency oxygen is nice to have for local dives and emergencies dealing with decompression sickness or DCI, but you can't fly with it. So I might throw it in there if you are considering diving local. It's nice to have emergency oxygen. Not super something that you put in your safe dive kit, but I wanted to throw it in there because it's with a first aid kit, just as a consideration for you. Might as well throw in a defibrillator too. Of course, it's more for your rescue divers out there, but it is a nice thing to have, and should you need it, you'll be glad to have it. Definitely a nice to have and more situational based on your training. Okay, we covered a lot of ground there, and I wanted to share some ideas of things that you might have, things that are nice to have, and things that maybe you probably will never have, but something to think about that you might want to carry with you. But here are things that I want to stress that you should probably have in your own Save a Dive kit. These are what I consider must-haves and that I take everywhere. And these are the compact tools that you need to work on your regulator. Like I said, the wrench and the hex bolt wrenches and the multi-tool doesn't hurt. Not to mention O-ring picks, mask straps, spare O-rings for your stuff, and silicone grease. Spare nuts and bolts for your regulator, your BCD, and anything else that you might have. Make sure you have the spares just in case. I have lost nuts and bolts. I was actually very disappointed that I did not have this at the time, so next time I'm gonna save the dive. A spare mouthpiece, zip ties, and an extra thing to put an octo somewhere in your triangle in case you lose one or your octo necklace breaks like mine did. Bungee or paracord. It comes in handy in all sorts of situations. Spare double enders and single enders, and those should be all neat and put into compartmentalized Ziploc bags. Well, at least for me. You can kind of find your own way, but that's worked well for me for keeping them dry and organized over time. Pretty much everything we covered for warm water diving also applies to cold water, minus the wetsuit repair kit. But the big game changer in cold temps, your dry suit. I still fondly remember the day I broke my neck seal. If you're new to dry suits, it happens a lot more than you'd like, and those seals are not cheap, trust me. Perhaps it's some ritual all dry suit divers must go through, but the key is they all must break their seals at least once. It's a rite of passage maybe. But if I can somehow save you some cash and some pain, the key is to go slow and be gentle and use that talcum powder. I usually talcum powder the seals at least once every other dive, if not every dive. In the event the seal breaks, especially neck seal, I hope you get the ones that are easily replaceable. Some dry suits need a shop to fix the seals, and that is extremely unfortunate. But fortunately, if yours is easy to replace and you always carry an extra neck seal or wrist seals with you and whatever tools you need, then you can fix it yourself. Just make sure to pack at least one extra neck seal and the tool you need to change it, and of course some wrist seals as well. And if you use dry gloves, make sure you pack some extras, because dealing with those clips, these get stuck in them all the time and tear small little holes. So just pack extra and you'll thank me someday. I'd also keep some zipper grease with you. I like it in the Save a Dive kit so I don't lose it and it's always there. You don't need to apply the zipper grease down the whole zipper, but the actual head of the zipper, as putting it on the teeth can attract unwanted dirt that jams or even breaks the teeth. And if you have a metal zipper, be aware that some require wax instead of grease. Check with your manufacturer. But carry some of this with you, and if the zipper is becoming hard to move, then put some grease or wax on that zipper. I usually put it on situational. As soon as I start noticing it's getting hard to move, that's when I put it on. You don't really need to put it on that often. And of course, I mentioned it already, but make sure you add that talcum powder in, as that will help you protect your seals. And of course, if you use a P valve in your dry suit, whether it's the She P or the male version, you'll want the disposable pieces that you're going to use to connect to it. And I usually put those in my Safe Dive kit too, so I never forget them. Okay, to summarize, if you're diving cold, you'll want to ensure you add talcum powder, zipper grease, a spare neck seal, and of course, spare wrist seals. I have 2. And of course, whatever tool you need for the neck seal, if your neck seal is even changeable, not all of them are. If applicable, and you're not using wet gloves, then of course, have a spare pair of dry gloves in there. Not too much extra versus the warm water. Think of it as additive, and most of it's for the dry suit maintenance. Have you ever torn a seal before on your dry suit? Have you been initiated into the dry suit club with that reckoning? Let me know in the comments below. I know I'm not alone, or maybe I am. Alright, now that I've probably overwhelmed you with a bunch of gear suggestions, you're welcome. Let's take some considerations, as I want you to be ready, aware, and thorough to avoid those disaster scenarios. As a reality check, your kit is not going to fix anything if it's not with you. First and foremost, if you're diving locally, you have a lot of flexibility. You can quite literally have a plastic sealed container and load it up full of everything I said. Of course, it can also be a very simple bag. If you're traveling, you probably need to be a little bit more selective. Here's how I travel smart without leaving essentials behind. Take note of the must-haves for warm and cold water diving that I mentioned earlier in the video, and those will be great guidelines for something you'd want to pack for travel versus what you might take with you for local. But definitely heavier items like batteries, inflator hose, duct tape, and bulky containers may not be great options to bring along. Consider those optional. And don't forget the airport rules. Make sure all your liquids and your lubes are less than 3.4 ounces or 100 millimeters to avoid the dreaded TSA gear confiscation moment. And I say TSA, but of course I also mean the security equivalents across the world. If you're bringing spare batteries and they are lithium, make sure you bring those on your carry-on, and they are under the flight regulation requirements. Once you have an initial Save a Dive kit and it's assembled, it's super easy to maintain. You can swap pieces in and out before trips and always add your kit to your packing list so you don't forget. Trust me, it's one of the lowest effort, high reward habits that you can build to empower yourself to save those dives and enjoy diving more. Because when something breaks, and it will, your future self will be glad you were ready. So whether I convinced you to start a Save a Dive kit today, or you were looking for what you were missing, I hope this gave you a little inspiration to be that diver who's actually prepared. If I missed anything, I'd love to know, and others watching this video as well. Drop in the comments below. And hey, we barely scratched the surface of having the right pieces to make field repairs here. But you might be wondering to yourself, how do you even maintain and repair your own equipment? Don't worry, I've got you covered. Check this video out next. The best part? You'll never feel that sinking oh no moment when something breaks again. The more you know, the more you'll love and protect the ocean. Until next time.